Hi, welcome back to Cannabis in Canada with Jason Wilcox. I'm sitting here with Rohan from the Green Cross Society of British Columbia. Once again, public speaker. Rohan, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jason.
We've had Rohan on before to talk about really the city regulations as we continue here on Cannabis in Canada to cover the evolution of what's happening and some of the concerns that are being raised and some of the small little implementation and flags that we're not quite sure what it means. And right off the hop, let's just get right into it. At first, I thought what an amazing step for the city of Vancouver to actually take a stand against the federal government's failure with the monopoly known as the licensed producers' ability to provide access for patients. But I was very surprised when I learned that not only did they try to regulate edibles, which they can't, even the Supreme Court of Canada could not legislate edibles. They could only regulate the law. The Supreme Court of Canada said, Jason Wilcox, you and other medical patients like you and Owen Smith, if you were a medical patient, you'd have a constitutional right to extracts. That's all they say. It's unlegislated. It's been thrown back to the federal government, and that's a big issue too. So, we have this policy in the city that says, oh, you can only have tinctures and this. I'm wondering if that's not pre-absorbed LP policy that's going to come out as soon as they drop what an actual extract is and what the legislation is going to be for LPs to serve it up. So one other part that stuck out to me, and we're going to get into this, Rohan, here in a second. I just want to say one other part that stuck out to me, and I just kind of really caught on to this just today, was the compassion clubs must have trade association membership in CMA-CD.
Yes.
I take exception to that, personally. As a medical activist that believes in a free and fair market and freedom of choice, and the Constitution of Canada, okay, and not having any arbitrary monopoly that's working in any capacity over top of the cannabis market for medical patients. Absolutely. What's your take on this?
Well, not only with the Green Cross, but a number of clubs. I know there's not only with that instance, but not having a choice. Being a Canadian, it's quite concerning, and unfortunately at this point in time, they've been the only group that's represented themselves. And it is about choice, and some of the things which they stand for, and most, a true compassion club would fall under. At the same time, once again, not being given a choice is quite concerning. Basically, the way the legislation and the last regulatory outline was laid out to us basically does say that, yes, we must conform and must be members of the CAMCD.
Does this not set a monopoly? A monopoly for CAMCD, and now then it makes me beg the question of who's answering to CAMCD, because why are other federal nonprofits not able to do that, or for that matter provincial nonprofits that may offer those services or want to offer those services? Who should give a monopoly? Just like there shouldn't be only so many LPs, there sure as hell shouldn't be a monopoly over who gets a dispensary based on CAMCD. Sorry to my friends with CAMCD who sit on those boards, but I can't conform to any sort of monopoly that simply holds this over top of what the dispensary models are going to look like. Anybody can look to California, just like the British Columbia Compassion Club Society did back in the day. Hillary Black, you know what I'm talking about. That's the basic Compassion Club model. Anybody should be able to implement that under a free and fair market here in the city of Vancouver. This should not be a monopoly with CAMCD. You shouldn't have to pay some trademark agreement on a chance that you might get in if you conform to their policies and procedures. And quite frankly, they're not something that isn't already known. It's quite actually implemented in many clubs already, because many of us learned from the British Columbia Compassion Club Society, who, by the way, founded CMA-CD with a few others. Such as Mr. Dana Larson. So
Absolutely.
It's very interesting how all this is playing out. And Dieter from over on the island, this is some stuff that's concerning, because when you go to the LIFT conference and you see them sitting on stage with all the LPs and trying to talk about this, that, and the need to regulate and control, and very much same language, I'm waiting like, wait a second. I think we need to really open our eyes here. There's 94 clubs. There's a lot of people that supply those clubs. That's a big piece of the economy. And Tilray's laying people off in their freaking job. They lay people off. There's no money being made. There's people being shut down. And one by one, they're going to continue to shut us down. They're going to use that word compliance. And I'm really fearful, because clubs like yourself that's been around, you're the second oldest club in Vancouver.
Yeah.
You have helped, I've watched it, children You've helped people like John, you know, with his chronic pain. You've done so much for the community and giving back. You've actually run your AGMs. You did Christmas parties. You did all kinds of stuff for your community, for your membership.
Absolutely.
You're a true nonprofit society. Why should you have to conform to their when you've done more? I would argue your own nonprofit has done more in clinical research and by testing, being the only club to test their damn medicine and to do peer-reviewed journals, 2 of them that I know of, to go and do, and 3, sorry, including Paul Hunt. So you got all these studies under your belt, and then they want to say, no, come conform to this and pay our fee, and you might have a chance in the lottery. I can almost make a song about that.
I mean, there are.
I'm really ranting about this because I just found out. I'm like, wow. I didn't see that coming. And I'm sorry to my friends, once again, on CamCD, but this ain't personal. This is business. This is about the patients, you know, and their rights to access.
Well, there's a lot of prominent figureheads, definitely, that represent a lot of the older, large clubs. Of course, Dana Larson, Jamie Shaw being the president and whatnot, from the dispensary and the BCCS. And, I mean, possibly maybe the Green Cross would have a representation on their board one day, which would be, I think, very positive at the same time, involving another club who's been on a harm reduction level for 10 years here within the city since day one. So when it comes to not having a choice, I mean, of course, not only as human beings and Canadians, but as members of our society, we always look to try and abide by what the city is looking for. At the same time, sure, it would be absolutely fantastic to have a choice. Fortunately, with the Green Cross, we follow into most of the guidelines already that the CAMCD is asking for. But once again, it's about having a choice, and we'll see what happens. Maybe one of these other regulatory groups I've heard of might provide something to the city on another level. This is, they've said, final draft, but at the same time, there will be provisions and changes, from what I understand, especially when it comes...
It needs to be noted to our viewers that, you know, the BC Civil Liberties Association has taken a position up against these regulations because they do not conform to the Supreme Court of Canada, nor, as my attorney has said, go to cannabiscanada.ca and look for the John Conroy article. He's also released his position, you know, on where the real laws stand around extracts. Cities should not be governing what edibles are because it conforms just into what the LPs dispensing edible laws or extract laws, in my own opinion, are going to be. Watch how this plays out. But in the meantime, I think we as the people need to address first the edible unconstitutionality and then look into follow the money. Where does this money go back to with the CMACD? Because I think there's a little more to this.
Absolutely, and that's why the Green Cross, we're looking at providing not only the city, but of course the province, the federal government, with a system which would offer, of course, edibles still at a quantified, standardized system, which would fall into their regulatory levels they're looking for. 5 milligrams, of course, 10 milligrams, of course, being the maximums in California, but on a very provisional system that's, of course, tested, something that we've done since day one with all of our products. And of course, this is where testing, which I think and we think as a society is so important, becomes really relevant when it comes to the edibles. Having a quantified, standardized product in the way of edibles is really few and far between. There's a few who proudly we work alongside who do offer it, but on a larger scale they don't. But if this system is completely taken out, it's already something that's promoted to the public, and whether it's the black markets, whether it's the illegal markets, people will recreate.
My concern is straight up. The patients, I am a medical patient. I have a debilitating illness. I'm now 22 years into it. I have friends that are in wheelchairs, friends that are in canes, friends that have trouble even making it up and down the damn stairwell to do their laundry and figure out how the laundry machine works, let alone try and bake a cannabis recipe. Let alone shouldn't have to. If they screw it up, they could ruin their medicine. In my own opinion, it's completely arbitrary policy, and I believe, once again, watch and see how the LPs are governed around what extracts they get. It'll be tinctures and oils. It'll be the same sort of monopoly. This is all part of a bigger problem, and I'm going to call it as I see it. It's my job to report media, and I've seen some of the leaders of the CMACD at the LIFT conferences and buddying up with the LPs and talking about needing to control and regulate the supply. I've never heard that talk from these clubs before. Quite frankly, it's disturbing. We've never had an overdose. We've never had any toxicities. We've never had any addiction issues. We fought for this for years. Now all of a sudden we're saying we need regulatory control? Bullshit.
At the Green Cross, we feel the exact same way. At the same time, now, as I was saying, when it comes to the testing provided, Something else we're really considering, because I mean, this is what's going to happen now with the new system they're implementing. It's going to attack another level, and it's, as you said, it's going to be our producers. Not only that will affect our membership, but at the same time, it's going to affect our levels and our standards. So we're trying to implement at least something which we feel is important right now, and that's back to it, the concentrates and solvent testing, which is something we're looking into seriously as at this point, to keep a low parts per million up to a certain standard.
Yeah. Well, definitely we want to keep stuff under 50 parts per million or around that area. And that's what people don't understand about some of the good work that you do. This is a prime example. And this is why I don't understand, why would a group that does more and is a long-standing provincial nonprofit need to conform and buy a goddamn license with some other federal nonprofit that's not to make any money. This is why I'm talking about how much money is there involved in this, and who's really shot calling this thing. I don't like how this smells. I would just watch the LPs move in, 1,200 applicants, only 24 licenses. Look at my videos from 2012 when I said there'd only be friggin' 51 licenses in the first 2 years. Right now we're at 24 and we're just over year one, on par with the projection of the federal government. And I fear that now they're moving on. They didn't win in Allard. They didn't get our gardens. They lost. But that's okay. Now they're moving on to the next enemy. That's the compassion clubs, which are now, in my own opinion, going to become LP clinic dispensaries, and they'll be forced into it. After $250,000 and tons of money being invested into your thing, and then they come along with the strike of the pen and say compliance, what do? Because you have a membership to look after.
That's right, and we are being forced into it. I mean, we've always abided by what the city's looking for, and things were a lot different, as I've said many times when I've spoken with you 10 years back. But along those lines, I mean, this is going to open the doors, once it's all said and done, for a whole new list of changes, which we're going to have to abide by at that point in time.
Well, this is where, when that word "have to abide by," I need to argue that, because when they had jail and they said, we're going to put you in jail, nobody abided. We continued. Even in America, where they had mandatory minimums, guys are getting 20 years. They kept growing, because when there's a need for proper supply, and demand, they'll do that. And even right now, look at the LPs that are laying people off in that and merging together. That's a sign of failure. That's a sign that they're not getting the monopoly that they wanted. People are not buying their stock at the price, when you add tax and shipping and handling, that is not going to be applicable when they can get it down the street for a lower price and often even better quality, because the LPs don't know what they're doing.
Oh, absolutely. And pardon me, maybe better wording, will be expected to abide by. And at that point, I mean, the changes are just going to come one after another from what we see. We'd like to have representation, not only maybe with CamCD and I mean more of the older clubs. We should have representation within the city council meetings and talk about the changes and the regulations. I'm not sure where they're getting all their access information from, where they've compiled their data. It seems it's more along the lines of in the last 6 months, or since this has become more of a public concern, where we've been doing this for 12 years now. Some of us a lot longer, 18 years for the BC Compassion Society.
What was your, as a speaker for the Green Cross, I'll put you on the spot, what is your position being said, you need to join this federal nonprofit that is no different than your provincial nonprofit? They're just federal, sort of like the other federal groups that are out there. Well, why is it that you need, what is your official feeling on having to conform to what in essence is just another new monopoly only on dispensaries?
We feel we've made some ground. So it has been positive on a lot of notes in the ways of now being represented, and of course the difference in between a profit and a non-profit or a not-for-profit. It's not so much a tier system now, but it looks like they've heard our voice, and we were fortunate to be able to speak to City Council at the same time when the regulatory guidelines are laid down. After being able to speak, it would sure be nice to maybe have a say in some of the actual regulations being laid down from people actually on the inside who actually know the inner workings and the way things are run, from quality control all the way up to...
Has City Hall ever come and talked to you guys about permitting or anything?
From what I understand, it actually was back to it, the LPs, which were asked originally questions on the way this situation should be done, but that's hearsay. I've only heard that. But at the same time, so, I mean, hopefully we'll be able to represent a long time in the city, the Green Cross, and of course being part of the pioneers and the original clubs in Vancouver. At the same time, we're hoping that we can make more of an impact, and there will be a lot more changes. I believe this is just the beginning, and there's a lot of different groups, which I can't really indulge on right now, that are going to be backing up their fight along the lines for keeping edibles in the clubs. Very important not only to them but to us as well, and we've touched on that.
Again, patients should not have to go home and learn how to bake.
No.
Based on legislation
That's right.
that the Supreme Court of Canada can't even issue.
That's right.
You know, they're stepping again on the Constitution, even the city,
And
by
this-
virtue of trying to help.
Absolutely, and this is where somebody, or more than a group, who represent the clubs and the clubs, whether it's the nonprofit clubs or the for-profit clubs, setting down policies and procedures, standardization and quantification. It's just something that needs to be worked alongside, and if they actually took the time to come talk alongside us, maybe we'd get a lot further.
But do we really need to govern cannabis like a gun and have standardization and quantification when we know there's no deaths, no toxicity, and no addiction more so than caffeine?
No, and at the same time, it's funny because something I was reading yesterday, and I know this happened a while back, but and pardon me, not so off topic, but the One Save on Foods, which is in Surrey, South Surrey, which has the 3 aisles with your liquor and your spirits, and I'm not sure if the public's aware, but there's a lottery which is going to be happening probably late this year, which is going to allow 500 more of these licenses, which is the main reason the liquor distribution situation isn't affecting so much the plan for the regulatory cannabis system, because they know there's 500 more of them going to be coming to your local grocery stores and your Starbucks. The biggest concern, of course, on a harm reduction level is now that children will be able to access alcohol, even though they say they're going to have a privatized security guard in that aisle, much easier than, and I hate to use it as an example, cannabis, but that's been their largest concern, and edibles. It's now going to be available in your local grocery store, 500 of them across British Columbia. Quite a concern to me.
How many years have we been talking about this? We lock up pills, we lock up alcohol so kids don't get it. If you're a parent and you got freaking cannabis and you don't want your kid to get it, lock it up like you would a pill. Are you freaking kidding me? I mean, this is so arbitrary. And the smell of, they say, oh, well, we don't like the smell of cannabis shops, you know, and you have to do all this other stuff. And I'm like, I don't like the smell of freaking alcohol. I still got to go walk by a damn beer bar, and when I'm going down Granville Street, freaking stinks.
That's
and they
right.
say, oh, we can't put up a cannabis. At least the cannabis clubs might drown out some of the smell of that damn stink.
That's right.
You know, I mean, honestly, some of the stuff that I'm hearing is just... it's just hard for me to get my head around. And this, most importantly, saying that you as a nonprofit need to join this nonprofit who doesn't exist at all other than to represent a few fractional members of the 94 clubs in British Columbia.
That's right.
That, to me, is a forced monopoly. They should not be forced into any of that. They should be given, this is what the general governance is that we were looking for a model. This is my own opinion, but they should be given this model and allowed to choose what they feel is best, okay, and you to decide whether it's compassionate. Because goddamn it, the research they're doing is sure as hell compassionate. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to have somebody give them massages or counseling in the next freaking room to comply to that particular model. This needs to be discussed and more vetted out more thoroughly before we just simply start Xing and telling people they need to comply to one simple model that is the British Columbia Compassion Club Society model, and Mr. Larson's model as well, with a little bit of additions onto it. Of course, he'll have to add some on, he knows that, but ultimately it'll come down to the compassionate aspect, and going back to our original clubs. And I also want to point out something to our viewers. Mr. Phil Lucas, my old mentor, my friend from the Vancouver Island Compassion Club Society, also formed or served on city council. I believe there's a lot to do with why you need to be a compassion club and a non-profit to get a license, and I believe Victoria will pass very much the same policy, because those will eventually be LP clinics. This is just my own opinion. So again, forethinking is speculation. It's nothing I can prove, but it's something I fear. I fear it's going to tear our culture apart. It's going to force a lot of us who want to supply our members to go underground. I've talked about this, you know, if they tried to drive the patients underground, so sure as hell they don't care if they drive us underground, but it's our membership I care about. You know, the patients shouldn't have to rely on just one or two or 20 clubs. Absolutely. And they certainly shouldn't have to rely on a manipulated model when there's so many improvised models helping medical patients. Let the goddamn patients decide.
And there's so many concerns that aren't even touched on, Jason. Like, for instance, the new compliance when it comes to being a nonprofit society or organization offering up the 60% member services. Well, we agree with that, but not necessarily the fact that they can't be cannabis based. This is what we do. This is what our model revolves around, whether it's the testing services provided or whether it's the educating of the community. And back at it, this is where, I mean, there could be a lot more involvement and a lot more educating going back and forth. And if we worked alongside them, a lot of this could probably come around a lot better. For instance, I know one of the main reasons that there's a huge concern with edibles. I've been in touch directly with Fraser Health and Coastal Health, and there's a committee being made to actually start educating the school system in not only Surrey but Vancouver about the effects of cannabis on a medicinal level. There's been more than a huge, overwhelming amount of, I guess, edibles showing up there. And I guess they need to be educated, and I agree with that.
Well, the question is this: now we've had a program since 2001. Where's all the other statistics on these kids that are getting into cannabis? You know, all I know is since I was a kid, cannabis was easier to get than alcohol, and more often than not, kids were using pills at school than they were cannabis because cannabis was considered the weaker drug. And if you really wanted to get high, then you would try something else like alcohol or pills or whatever. But I'm quite surprised that now they're trying to turn cannabis still into that. It's an evil drug, but again, it's no more addictive than caffeine.
No, absolutely, and I don't know so much about it. I've just kind of overheard what was going on at the same time. We both know that there's much bigger problems out there. Cannabis is not the gateway drug. It's very medicinal on so many therapeutic levels. What I was trying to reflect on is the educating. This should be a part of the new system implemented, is having cannabis touched on, whether it's the educating of the public. These should all be member services, or pardon me, nonprofit society. It should be part of the system and should be included.
Absolutely, and again, this goes back to harm reduction, awareness, education, but no one model, in other words, no one CMACD model should be implemented on all clubs nor patients. There should be allowed for us to explore and improvise and look at what's best for the patients and let the patient numbers talk, not the number of years they've been operating and just statistical data that says that their model somehow is best. You know, you've asked for no patient feedback, and from the research I've been able to do, I've heard that there's been really no consultation with the clubs, you know, except those that didn't want to officially go on record. Anyway, there was no consultation with any of the stakeholders. So it's very, very concerning as we look at BC's culture, the only province in the country that has 94 clubs. Our culture is under attack. I've been saying this for 2 years. They're trying to buy us out. They started with the patients. They failed in Allard. They got their ass kicked in R versus Smith. And now they're sitting there looking at, okay, what next? Let's take out the clubs because we own the legal right since April 1st, 2014 to sell cannabis in this country. And those dispensaries are infringing on our business. So how do we deal with the problem in BC? Because I tell you now in St. Catharines, Ontario, there is an LP clinic where you can walk in, see a doctor, order your shit, and pick it up in a couple of days. That's the issue I have because they plan to do hubs in every province. Yes, it's our job to report this, and I'm here to keep talking about it.
And something I've noticed the last week, of course, I'm not sure if you read it yourself, but they're trying to have medical practitioners sign for only 25 years of age or older now, which is quite concerning. As we know, we have helped children and still are with CBDs more these days than actually just cannabis, of course, cannabidiol, and had great success, of course, mostly as an antispasmodic these days, and you read about it all the time. At the same time, I'm having trouble finding doctors, honestly, signing for anyone under 25, which is quite concerning. Because that's much over the illegal.
That's the CMA coming out again with their silly regulation that again, it's very arbitrary to try and set these things because it's going to just lead to more lawsuits, more constitutional challenges, because it's going to be arbitrary limits and infringe on the limits on access, and it will be challenged. Just so people understand, in Allard, we only challenged what we could at the time when the MMPR came into force. And just before it came into force, we knew we could attack on the issue of gardens and the fact that no fire, mold, or organized crime existed. Therefore, they could not strip us of the right to autonomy. The Section 7 issue was met because there was Bill C-10 implemented by our brilliant conservatives. And then because of the fact that they went ahead and implemented the MMPR, that allowed us to meet Section 7's test, move on to the arbitrary Section 1 issues, and win the case, in my own opinion, as projected by many of the academics. On that note, this has been a bit of a long interview. I know my team's tired. It's a bit of a hot day out. So, Rohan, thanks for coming on.
Always a pleasure,
Where can
Jason.
people find you at the Green Cross and get in more information if they want to talk about getting their strains tested or getting more information about what you're doing? Or future plans, where can they find you?
We're at 4296 Main Street in Vancouver, as well as 2145 Kingsway. So come say hello. We test all of our medicines. We'd be glad to have you there. We're accepting new membership at all times. We're still looking for practitioners' statement.
And your website is Cannabis or Green Cross?
www.greencrossbc.org.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one. Excellent. And I just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, MMJ and Karuna Medicinals and Green Planet. Green Planet Nutrients. There's just a lot of different things going on right now. And in order for these shows to happen, in order for us to keep doing this education, we need to keep coming together, building alliances, making sure that we're fully informed of what's going on. Because I truly have concerns for what is, in essence, BC brand and us, the BC economy.
Absolutely.
So on that note, I look forward to having you back on the show, Rohan.
Always a pleasure, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you. You have yourself a great day.
You too.
See you on the next show.